ONE D&D was announced on August 18th, 2022, promising many nice things, but leaving a lot of us D&D lovers a little apprehensive about the direction of the game and potential disturbances to our fragile ecosystem of players, DMs, game stores, VTTs, and game mechanics that all make our hobby fun and easy to engage with. So I asked you, what's your biggest concern with the ONE D&D playtest document? And out of over 500 responses, we're going to look at the top 10 issues with ONE D&D. But the real reason I'm making this video is to remind you that tomorrow, September 1st, they release the first ONE D&D survey, and we all need to get on there, tell them what they did right, and tell them what could be better. That's how we're going to make sure this next version of D&D,
it's just D&D,
is as awesome as it can be. Because I'm Bob, this is where we learn how to have more fun playing D&D together, and the first two concerns are very simple, focusing on some mechanics. For me, the combination of spell lists into 3 categories makes a lot of sense, but it breaks down when you dive into the particulars. I believe this will need some iterations to get right. Now, I'm into the simplicity of these 3 lists defined by their sources of magic, but yeah, others said it makes classes that would share spell lists a little less unique, and to be honest, I'm not 100% certain that class spell lists would go away, or if these new categories would just be new tags added to each spell. And I think clearing that up when we eventually see a spellcasting focused playtest document will really help us form better opinions about this one. Number 9. Haven't seen anyone really talk about it, but the change to how grappling works is the big thing I noticed. While they buffed the effect, presumably they're referring to grappled creatures having disadvantage on attacks, they also nerfed its reliability severely. I'm really hoping that if the rule that it is now an unarmed strike and allows saving throws instead of an ability check stays, they will finally give us a grappler subclass. And yeah, I saw other comments breaking down that contested rolls, athletics versus acrobatics, etc., are fun, and replacing those contests with a static DC based on strength is less fun, but it is more streamlined, so I don't mind it entirely. The second point made here, though, is fantastic. With a more thorough definition and real mechanical backbone for unarmed strikes, grapples, and shoves, this opens the door for that brawler or wrestler type character that many of us have wanted to play. I don't know how we have 3 whole casting classes that channel their magic from a higher power, but we don't even have a single martial subclass for this whole branch of real-world martial arts. 8. My biggest concern isn't from the playtest material. On the whole, I quite like it. And I quite like that positivity. My concern is what they've done with the digital/physical bundle and a new online shop to go with it. What happened to supporting local game stores? We're going to hear a few more iterations of this concern because it's the big one. Frankly, with the new box set having that exclusive release at Target, which Target completely fumbled according to the many stories, and my own, that I heard of people not being able to get it on release day because Target's inventory system is messed up, and WotC basically creating their own online shop in addition to what Amazon already does to game stores is just kind of adding insult to injury, and I hope they can reshape the distribution of these bundles into some model that includes selling at local small businesses. 7. The race and background stuff seems fine. I agree. Getting inspiration for rolling a 20, a nat 20 always succeeding regardless of modifiers despite them mentioning DC 30 checks 6 lines earlier. What's the point of a DC 30 if the characters with a -1 has a 5% chance to pass? Is very dumb. And crits should definitely still apply to enemies. Yeah, I agree that nothing in the race and background section bothered me that much, but something about those races is very high on our list, so we'll talk about that in a minute. Next, inspiration on the 20 is kinda dumb. It makes sense thematically, like, hey, you just had this awesome success, therefore you're inspired to do better on something else, but then you can theoretically earn multiple of these inspiration advantages per day as long as you use them quickly, because they don't stack. And having multiple free advantage rolls per day to use whenever you want seems like it could make the game too easy. Now, assuming you're going to crit at least once per day anyway, I think this could be streamlined into characters just having 1 free inspiration per long rest, but that is already a new feature for the new human. So maybe humans would just get an extra inspiration like they do with feats anyway? And yes, I totally agree, there is no real point to DCs above 20 if there's always a 1 in 20 chance of success. And crits should definitely apply to enemies. We'll talk about that as well. 6. I have no issues with the play material. I think that a lot of it looks promising and that they've been good about taking feedback in the past. The VTT concerns me. This screams potential for microtransactions, locking all digital content behind a paywall even if you own the books. With the large amounts of comments about this same thing, I don't think it would happen immediately, but it would happen eventually. And again, 5. My biggest fear is for local gaming stores and third-party creators. Content, minis, podcasts, homebrew, etc. And again, 4. Anybody who's been involved in the video game landscape can tell you that games as a service is a toxin to the hobby and the industry, but that's less applicable to TTRPGs. Turning D&D into a live service game is unthinkably bad, unfathomably. So I did not cherry pick these comments. These are actually the top 10 from that post. But before we touch on this big topic of the problematic digitization of the hobby, I'm going to conduct either my best or worst sponsor ad ever for the one and only online service that genuinely provides value to me as a dungeon master by saving me a ton of time and by extension to my players. 1, by making my game prep more streamlined, which allows me to focus more on parts of their character development, and 2, by generally improving their experience with the game world itself. Yeah, it's our longtime sponsor, Describe. You already know, they're the premier online library of professional, cinematic, flavorful, descriptive text that brings your world to life whether you're playing online or at the table, because within seconds, you can find and save an awesome descriptive scene for whatever you need. Lots of free content, but you can sign up to get over 8,000 scenes and save 10% using the link below and code BOB. Now, here are the main problems people cited with D&D as a whole becoming an online service-based business. You don't really own the stuff. You probably have to pay for tons of tiny upgrades, aka microtransactions. Your options as a player in that digital play experience are sometimes limited to what you see on the screen and what tools your DM knows how to use, and it's just more expensive than buying a book and a dry erase board or using a free VTT like Owlbear Rodeo. We could spend a long time on each of these points, but that's worth its own video. So if you're interested in that discussion, check out the fantastic analysis already done by Baron over on Dungeon Masterpiece. I will put a link to his video at the end of this one. 3. I'm not really worried. I think this is a situation of throw everything at the wall and see what sticks kind of playtest document. I'm going to be getting with my players to do some Session 0 style prep with the new Origins, see where the wrinkles show up. A lot of people using fainting couches here probably haven't even discussed these options in real life with their gaming group, considering the PDF hasn't been out but for 1 day. At the time they wrote this, of course. Don't get discouraged. It's all just ideas. If you don't like them, you don't have to use them. Very well said. I love the imagery of the overdramatic trolls on fainting couches. And yeah, not only do you not have to use these changes, but remember, we get to help shape these changes by taking that survey, too. I'm a bit annoyed with them removing dwarf/halfling subraces and seemingly removing Aasimar to replace them with aardvarks. Okay, this seemed to confuse a lot of folks. They didn't remove Aasimar. Aasimar was never in the player's handbook, and these are the future player's handbook races, so it just wouldn't be in here. But it is totally valid that the Ardling is very similar to the Aasimar, and I don't understand why they created a whole new angelic race. It's literally the opposite design philosophy of removing those subraces, which I actually think is a good idea, because it makes the races themselves more distinct from each other. Like, conceptually speaking, not mechanically, but conceptually, what's the difference between a stout halfling and a hill dwarf? We probably don't need dragonborn, lizard folk, and kobolds as playable races. We definitely don't need both Aasimar and Ardlings. I think the designers kind of painted themselves into a corner by including Aasimar in Mordenkainen's Monsters of the Multiverse because they didn't want to immediately rewrite it again for this playtest, but they should have. The only conceptual difference between these two races is the Ardling's choose your own animal face feature, which is kind of cool, but it makes the addition of this race just look like WotC's easy way of getting every single possible beast folk you could want to play in the player's handbook. It's efficient, but I'd rather have Aasimar and a generic beast folk with a bunch of different lineages. Then they could do away with the 2 kinds of cat folk we already have, the 2 kinds of bird folk, and the 3 kinds of reptile folk that are cluttering up my rulebooks. Okay, the top concern about ONE D&D. I highly doubt no monster crits will stick unless they add recharge abilities to way more monsters. That's really the only thing I have concerns about so far. The background changes are all really good. Yes, this is exactly what I said in my initial breakdown video of the playtest doc. Most of it's fine, but the way they're handling crits, and inspiration I guess, just doesn't feel right. Taking it away from spells? Okay, I guess, because it kinda gives martial attacks a boost, but taking it away from dungeon masters? I just can't do it. And it's funny because in that hour-long interview with Todd Kenrick, Crawford was very careful here to explain that this is just a playtest idea.
And again, I really want to emphasize, this is a great example of a playtest giving us the chance to experiment with something.
Remember, this is not set in stone.
Right,
This is playtest.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And tried to justify it, saying that random crits can easily kill level 1 characters, while powerful recharge abilities can be used decisively by DMs. But it just doesn't really check out for me. I would rather have a weirdly specific rule saying level 1 characters are immune to crits, or, like this comment, just have recharge abilities for way more monsters. Like, I would want every monster, maybe not every monster, but almost every monster to have an optional recharge ability, and even then, whether I'm the DM or just a spellcaster PC, this means that when I roll a natural 20 on an attack, nothing special happens? It doesn't feel like D&D to me. So that's exactly what I'm gonna write on the survey. September 1st, fill it out with your own opinions and quickly, because they sometimes only leave those surveys up for a few days. Now, this video has more on ONE D&D. This video has Baron's breakdown of the problems with the digital play experience. Thanks for helping shape the future of D&D in positive ways, and keep building.